Hi, my name is Cassandra Vincent and I work for PATH. PATH is Partners Against Trafficking Humans, and at PATH we provide services to survivors of sexual abuse, sexual assault, as well as sex trafficking and any other sex-related crime, whether it be rape, molestation, having to do with pornography, any sex-related crime. We service those survivors who are in need of assistance. And so today we're going to do a little bit of human trafficking 101 because many people don't realize that it happens or that it happens here. So, human trafficking. What human trafficking is, it's a difference that from human smuggling, and sometimes people use those terms interchangeably. Trafficking is a crime against a person, whereas smuggling is a crime against the nation's border. And so there are three different forms of human trafficking. You have labor trafficking, where someone is being made to work and they're paid very little or no money for the work that they're doing. Sometimes you'll hear that referred to as domestic servitude, where someone is working in the home, taking care of the kids, prepping all the meals and doing everything, and they're not being paid for their services. You may also have heard of children that have worked in sweatshops, to where they're underage to be working and they're working very long hours, sleeping, eating, and working in those shops to make these high quality products that we like to purchase. You also have organ trafficking, which you don't hear lots about that in the United States, but it does happen. And that's where someone will take one of your major organs, harvest it, maybe put it in an ice chest like we like to carry our water and cokes in, and sell it on the black market. And then you have sex trafficking. And what sex trafficking is, it's where an individual is making a profit on another individual by selling them. And they have it happen in three ways. It's either through force, where like you see in the movie Taken, or on TV where someone is kidnapped or taken against their will. We hear a lot of stories around town now about the white vans that are running around kidnapping people. That's an example of force. You also have fraud, lots of fraudulent job offers. We had a young lady who was handpicked to be a model, and so out of all of the headshots that came in, they wanted her. And when she got there, she realized that it was not actually a modeling job. So you have lots of fraudulent job offers and promises that are being made that aren't kept. And then you have coercion, and what coercion is where someone is making threats against you or one of your family members. We had a family that came in to see us where the mom spoke very little English, and she had two young girls with her. They were around 4 and 6 years old, and found out that the 6-year-old was being sexually abused by the father, who was a U.S. citizen, and mom was not. And so he was making threats against mom, saying that if you report me, then I'll have the kids come and stay with me and you'll be deported. So he was using coercion and threats as a means of getting mom not to tell what was going on with those children. And so just to hit on some quick facts and stats, there's an estimated 27 to 30 million victims of human trafficking. Sometimes with statistics, it's hard to find data because it's either unreported or underreported. And so sometimes you don't find any data or very little at all. Contrary to popular belief, all victims of human trafficking are not females. 1 in 4 is a little boy, and the average age is 12 to 14 years old. That's middle school, and that's in the United States. In Asia and other countries, 7 to 9 is the average age, and they're getting younger and younger. The youngest survivor that we at PATH have worked with was 4 years old, a 4-year-old victim of pornography, where she was being posted on the internet and set up for sexual favors. And so once everyone found out that that's what that was, it was kind of a disbelief that someone 4 years old could be victimized like that. And so here's just a few additional stats. 800,000 people trafficked yearly, and there are 30 million slaves worldwide. That's all trafficking is. It's modern day slavery. And actually, human trafficking is only the second largest to drug trafficking. It's second largest in the United States. So it's a very fast criminal growing industry. So in my previous career, I worked for the Division of Children and Family Services, and I used to wonder sometimes what happened to those kids when they were in the foster care system and they would run away. And so I started looking at some stats on what happens when someone runs away. And I found that 1 in 3 runaways will be approached by a pimp within 48 hours of being out there on the streets. According to the Center for Missing and Exploited Children, 1 in 5 endangered runaways were in the custody of DHS at the time that they ran away. And so the likelihood of them being approached and becoming a victim of sex trafficking is very high. Approximately 300,000 American youth are at risk of becoming sex trafficking victims. And so there's so many child abuse and sexual abuse cases each year. We have over 1 million childhood sexual assaults each year in the United States. And that's just the numbers that have been reported. And so, again, trafficking is a big industry. It's second to drug trafficking. And if you know anything about drug trafficking, you know that it's a big industry. It brings in lots of money. You see the drug bust on TVs, and you see a lot of property and money and fancy cars. Well, human trafficking worldwide is $150 billion industry annually. And sex trafficking is $32 billion. And those numbers probably have increased right as we speak. And so just to kind of bring it home and make it plain, it's right up there with Google and Nike and Starbucks, places that we frequent and utilize on a day-to-day basis. That's how much money it brings in. So it all goes back to the almighty dollar. One of the most frequent forms of recruiting is through peers. Now, we talked about the force, the fraud, and the coercion. Peer recruitment is becoming very popular, and especially with our youth. And just think about it. Our kids trust their friends. I can tell my child something, and it may go in here and come out here. But one of his friends can say the exact same thing or tell them something, and sometimes they'll take that at face value. And so because abusers and traffickers know that I may not be able to go up and approach this young person, but their friend can. So what they do is what's called a grooming process, where they bring that friend in and they start buying them things and giving them expensive gifts and taking them on trips and just building them up. But what they're doing is they're building them up as that kid is building up debt with that abuser. And so now it's like, you owe me, so why don't you go and bring your friend along? So they're going to places that our kids like to hang out, in the malls, in the trampoline parks, at sporting events, extracurricular activities, and using their friends to recruit them because they know they're going to go along with what some of their friends want them to do. And so when I was looking at this slide, when I was doing some research on it and saw all of these different social media venues, just about every one of us is on one, if not all, but at least one or more of these. And so you have media sites like Kik and Instagram and Twitter. And even though social media was set up for connecting, everything someone put a negative spin on it, you don't always know who you're connecting with. And so that's why social media is a very hot area for people to recruit, because you can be anybody you want to be on the other side of that keyboard. And so lots of times you think you're talking to someone of your same age and in your same area, when it could actually be an abuser or a trafficker that's looking to lure you. Now, when I saw the Xbox Live, I was a little thrown by that because I'm an Atari girl. So that's kind of telling my age. And so I grew up, we played in Atari, we plugged it into the TV, we played Miss Pac-Man, we had the joysticks. I can't do this with the controllers. That's just not my thing. I'm not that coordinated. And so at midnight, the TV went off, the games were off. It was no more TV when that Star Spangled Banner came on until the next day. And so when I saw the Xbox Live, I was like, well, how does that play into it? Well, with that, those games now are through an internet connection. So you can be online playing with your friends. And again, because I'm an Atari girl, I didn't know that. And so my youngest son, a few years back, when the PlayStations first came out, he was gifted a PlayStation 4 for Christmas. And so one night I heard him up playing the video game. And I'm like, who's he talking to? Surely there's nobody in this house. I know he didn't do that. So I got up and I went to see who he had in the house. Like, who are you talking to? And he had his little headset on and he was just playing the game. And he was saying, I'm playing with Austin and Michael. And he named all these kids. And on the screen, I could see screen names, but it wasn't those kids' names. There were these real cool names that they made up. And so I was like, well, I know those kids. I know their parents. We've traveled together. They've been to my house. He's been to their house. No big deal. And I went back to my room. But later on, I thought about it. Well, wait a minute. If he can be on there playing with them, that means he can be on there connecting with anybody. So again, it goes back to that connection that you don't always know who you're online playing video games with, who you're online chatting with. And it takes 24 hours for someone to post something online for a trafficker or an abuser to own in on that and start a conversation with you. And so once I realized that, hey, he can connect with anybody, it was kind of scary. So now I'm always checking to see who he's talking to. What are you doing? Who are you texting on that phone? Because as a parent, it's my job to spy on him and to keep him safe. So as adults, as parents, as aunts and uncles and grandparents, as educators, it's your job to know what those children are doing when they're in your classroom and they're using those Chromebooks. You should be monitoring what sites they're on and what they're doing and who they're chatting with at all times. Traffickers like to target vulnerable populations. And so they're not going to go after somebody that's smart and high self-esteem and that's walking with their head held high. Somebody like me, I talk too much, I'm moving fast, I'd be too much work for them. They're going to prey on the young ones that want to hang with the older ones, someone that's hanging out by themselves, even some of those that have disabilities. And it doesn't even have to be a severe disability. It could be a learning disability. It could be something physical, but something to where they're mentally incapacitated and makes it easy for that person to take advantage of them. A language barrier, like I mentioned earlier, the woman didn't speak very much English, so she was an easy target because she didn't really know what she could or couldn't do as far as reporting, and people from different cultures and backgrounds. So again, those people that are vulnerable are easier targets than someone else to become victims of trafficking. So in the state of Arkansas, a lot of times people say, well, that stuff doesn't happen here. That happens in big cities or in other countries. Well, if you follow the news stories, and even on our Path Facebook page, we're always keeping updates of what's going on right here in our great state of Arkansas, because we want people to be safe and to be aware so that they can stay safe. And so Arkansas, if you see how it's situated, lots of states border us. I can step down here and be in Texas, Tennessee, Mississippi, Missouri, Louisiana. There's lots of states that we're right on the border. Traffickers don't stay in one place for a long period of time. And so because of the way that our state is situated, and we've got good old Interstate 30 that goes through there, and good old 40. 40 goes a very long way. You can travel Interstate 40 from one state to another to another. And because traffickers move around, Arkansas is a hot spot for them. And because Arkansas is a hot spot, it makes it easy for them to come through here. So when you're traveling, you're looking at all the truck stops. And usually at every truck stop, there's some type of motel in that area. Even in Arkansas during duck hunting season, because anytime there's lots of people and lots of money, you have prime area for trafficking. So during duck hunting season, people come down, they come to the state of Arkansas, duck and deer hunting, and that's bringing in lots of people and lots of money. Sometimes that brings the traffickers to bring the women in. Super Bowl, even though we don't have an NFL or NBA team here, but the Super Bowl is the #1 venue for trafficking. Again, lots of people and lots of money. And so because Arkansas is building up, and we've got now casinos and gambling and racing and all of these things coming into play, it's making us an even bigger target, and with the interstate. And so I was speaking with a law enforcement officer one time, and he was saying that after he took some trafficking training, he was very discouraged because he started thinking back to a lot of the traffic stops he'd made on 40 and 30 and some of the other interstates that run through here. And he says, now I think back to some of the people that were in those vehicles, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I let a trafficker go, because it was one guy, he said, that had a van, and he had 3 or 4 really pretty girls, and nobody was answering any questions but this guy. And he says, I just thought, hey, he was speeding. He may have been doing something he had no business. He said, but until I took that training, I had no idea that I probably let a trafficking ring go by. And so that happens all the time. And that's the key, is to being aware. In the classroom, a lot of times, one of our former clients said that when she was in high school, she would throw hints at her teacher because she'd been being sexually abused in the home. And so growing up, all she knew was abuse. And so she grew up to become an abuser and then continued to be victimized. And she said once she got into different settings and around other people, she realized that doesn't seem like what I grew up with. Maybe that's something different that shouldn't be happening. And so she would throw hints at her teacher. Well, if you look at the classroom settings today, you have 20, 30 kids sometimes in a classroom. And unless they have block scheduling, they only have 45, 50 minutes per class. So by the time you get the 20, 30 students in there, you've got 10 of them that you've got to get calmed and settled down. You've got the other 20 that are doing their thing, and you have some that are really willing to learn. And the teacher just doesn't have time to catch a hint. And so what PATH was instrumental in doing was passing some laws and legislation in 2017 where it was mandatory now for teachers and educators and counselors to get continuing ed. That way they can see some signs and know what to look for and converse with other teachers to find out if something's going on in that classroom or in this classroom, or do we need to get the parent involved? And I've gone to a couple of schools and spoken to the students and had students come up to me, I'll say about 99% of the time before I leave that school. One of those kids will come and say, that was me, or I'm glad you came today to give me that information, or I know someone, or let me tell you what happened, or let me show you this picture, or here's some screenshots. So awareness is key. And because you can't be everywhere all the time, that's why it's important to learn that. And so I'm glad that that legislation passed in 17 for the teachers and educators to get continuing ed. Another law that was passed in 2017 was the TAP bill, or Truckers Against Trafficking. And with that bill, anyone that's applying for or reapplying for their CDL, their commercial driver's license, has to watch a video and take a test on trafficking. And lots of times truckers get a bad rap. They think, well, they're the ones that are after, they're transporting. And just like with any profession, there's going to be some good people and there are going to be some bad people. But there have been lots of truckers that have seen things now that they've been trained where they were able to help save a young woman or a young man, because again, 1 in 4 is a little boy, or get them to a safe place and notify law enforcement. And so that we were instrumental in working with the Truckers Against Trafficking group on getting that passed. And then the John Bill. The John Bill was also passed in 2017. And they call that bill the John Bill because John is one of the names that they refer to the purchasers as. And so with the John Bill, if someone gets arrested or pulled over and they have a victim in their vehicle, the victim is taken to safety, the car is impounded, the abuser is arrested, and they pay a $500 impound fee. And many times that person that they have in their vehicle is a minor, so they're going to be on the sex abuse registry. And so now everybody's going to know why they're arrested, why they're having to pay $500 to get their car out of the impound. And that kind of was set up to slow down or stop the abuse from happening. However, we know that law enforcement is busy solving other crimes, doing murders, and some other things sometimes take precedence over just regular stops or traffic stops. And so what the goal is to work again with law enforcement to revamp that bill when we go back to legislation, and maybe funds that are secured from the impounding of the vehicle can be split between service agencies like PATH and law enforcement, instead of all of the funds going into providing services for those survivors. And so those are just some of the things that were put in place in 2017. There's always a need to get involved. Many people want to know, well, what can I do? How can I get involved? One of the ways that you can get involved is to donate. Every dollar that's given to PATH goes to direct survivor service care, whether it be to put money in our vehicle to pick up someone on an emergency intake, to get food for a family that doesn't have any food, to do transportation for some of our young people that the parents may not have adequate transportation to get them to and from therapy or to and from the day center to get the services that they need. You can also volunteer. We absolutely love volunteers. Probably couldn't make it without volunteers. There's a need for volunteers to work the helpline. We have a 24-hour helpline. That number is 501-301-HELP. There's a need for volunteers to teach classes, to become mentors. There are various ways you can get involved. So don't think that, well, I don't have a good skill set, or I'm not an artist. Nothing is too small. So we welcome you to come and join the PATH team in a volunteer or even in a paid position if there's a position out there. Now, one of the requirements is that you attend what's called a victim services and awareness training. PATH does these trainings 4 to 5 times per year, and they're a day and a half. And so in that training, you're going to learn everything. This was just a snippet of what you'll get in the victim services and awareness training. You're going to learn who the trafficker is, who the victim is, how to spot it, how to stop it, how to stay safe, what I can do, how to talk to them. There's so many different areas you're going to learn about in that training. And one thing that training did for me is I took it before I started working here. And my friends say that I'm the nosy friend in my group, and so I'm always checking stuff out, snooping around. I think in my next life I will be a crime scene investigator because I just want to know the details, how it happened, why it happened, and I want to know all of that. And so in the training, after I walked out of there, I had a whole new awareness of what was going on around me. I saw things I otherwise never paid attention to, and they were right in my face. And it made me think back to a friend that I had growing up, and I always wondered, why does she want to come to my house? I have rules. I've got curfew. I can't be on the phone all night. If we go skating or somewhere, we've got to be home before everybody else. Why does she want to come here when she's got free reign at her house to come and go as she pleases? She's got all the high-end fashion. She's got everything. Well, after taking that training, I started looking at signs and symptoms and things to look for. She fit that profile. So it made me think back to her family dynamics and who was living in her home and the things that were going on there. And it made me realize that she was a victim, maybe not of sex trafficking, but possibly some type of sexual abuse was going on in that home. And I kind of got an idea of who the abuser was. So again, it heightens your awareness and makes you look at things in a whole different light. Thank you for your time and attention today. I hope that something was said that was very, very, very valuable to you, something that will heighten your awareness, something that will want to stir something on the inside of you and make you want to get involved to help us help them. Thank you.